let's look at the response of the international community now. African leaders have never been known to criticize Robert Mugabe. So my surprise here is when I see the Botswanan president, Ian Kama, saying Mugabe should step down. We're not monarchs, we're just presidents.
Most African leaders respected Mugabe before. But now they
For 37 years?
Yes, they respected him. Because why? They always avoid confrontation with him. Whenever he speaks in the African Union, they all kind of allow him to speak. When it was his turn to become the chairman of African Union, they allowed it, despite the whole world saying Mugabe is not fit and proper. The African Union said, no interference, leave us alone, and they allowed Mugabe. But the international community have been against Mugabe for a long time. Yeah. The sanctions have not helped in crippling the economy of Mugabe.
You mentioned the president of Botswana. How many other African leaders have, condemned?
Yes,
so,
he's the only one, really.
Just one, not even Zuma.
Yes.
So, there is a pattern. Like you said, this propensity for dictatorship among African leaders. They come to talk about democracy, democratic values and all that, but at the end of the day, you see them, not coming out to really condemn.
A perfect example would be the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame, who spoke against African leaders being, in long time serving African leaders, and now he's doing the same thing. He's possibly going to be in power until 2024.
That is it.
The same thing with Nkurunziza in
Burundi, and then even Congo. Yes. The Congolese, the man his tenure has expired. Yes. So he's there now as, we don't even know. His tenure has expired. He's no longer, he no longer has the mandate. He keeps shifting when elections will hold, So it's not something that is peculiar to, Zimbabwe, but 37 years is just too long. And then at the end of that 38 years, you now want to bring your wife to, it's just incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Do you think Emerson Mnangagwa will be a better leader?
Well, we cannot really say because, he has been a vice president for so long and also very close to Mugabe until the disaffection between the two of them. But looking at the larger picture is that SANU-PF is saying Mugabe has been removed and Mugabe is removed. But Mugabe is still the president of Zimbabwe.
Until he steps down.
Until he steps down. Between now and the time he steps down, there is a vacuum. The military can fill that vacuum by saying they are appointing somebody as interim president, or we can wait until December when they will have the ZANU-PF National Conference, in which case everything will be decided. And what I think is that Mugabe will certainly agree to step down. But it's the terms of the stepping down they are working out. So behind the scene, there's so many things going on. But we cannot say that now because we are not there.
I'm confident that Mugabe will step down. And that stepping down is a matter of hours or at the very most days, not weeks.
Yeah, he will most likely have stepped down by the time this program goes on air anyway.
For the sake of Zimbabweans, it's better he step down.
Yeah, but what does this portend for Zimbabwe's political future? Because Robert Mugabe, of course, didn't have a successor except for his wife, Grace Mugabe, and then the ZANU-PF desperately needing leadership is suddenly now to Mnangagwa. Where does Zimbabwe stand politically? And Zimbabweans really have never known any other leader apart from Robert Mugabe.
But you see, the party is always there. The ZANU-PF is always there. And within ZANU-PF, there is recruitment of new generation every year. They recruit new people, talents, into the party, who are usually the children of the old revolutionary guards. They send them for studies. When they come back, they absorb them into the party structure. So they are there. Then the army is there. So Zimbabwe cannot fall if Mugabe go. And one thing we have to be very, very watchful is that the military have realized that they cannot just remove him just like that. That's why this negotiation. This is what was the failure in Libya, that Gaddafi was haunted until he was killed. Okay, he fought to the end, and the state disintegrated and became, lawless.
And that would be
anarchical.
terrible if it happened.
That
in
was
Zimbabwe.
terrible. So in this situation, we have to give Mugabe and the SANU-PF and the military a chance to negotiate how the his end of tenure is going to be negotiated. And after that, who is going to succeed him also have to be negotiated, so that we don't have anarchy and chaos like we had in Zimbabwe and in Libya and in other places.
I don't think that things would turn topsy-turvy. There's already a structure. There won't be a vacuum as such. I mean, the military is there, ZANU-PF is there, Mugabe will be negotiated out of office, certainly, and then an interim leader will be appointed that will lead the country until elections are held, and ultimately, Zimbabweans will determine their future. It doesn't even have to be ZANU-PF, really, if a good democratic culture exists. It doesn't have to be ZANU-PF. See what happened in France. Emmanuel Macron came from nowhere, and he's now president, leading the country, to my mind, the right direction. So,
that is a bit radical.
That is mature
it's radical, but
democracy.
if it happened in France, why not in Zimbabwe?
It cannot happen in
But there won't
Zimbabwe.
be a vacuum.
But-
That is a gratifying thing. In all this confusion,
Yes.
I mean, it's clear that there won't be a vacuum. I mean, elections are also around the corner, and we imagine that Zimbabweans will determine who leads them.
Okay, as we bring this conversation to a close, do you think that other long-serving African leaders are also scared about what's happened in Zimbabwe? Do you think that they fear the same fate? For example, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who has also been in power for about 30 years or more. We talked about Pierre Nkurunziza of Burundi, and now Paul Kagame of Rwanda.
We can also speak of our friend in Equatorial Guinea,
Oh, yeah.
Nguema Mbasogo.
Oh, but he's stepped down, hasn't he? And his son is
Yeah, man,
president.
we're still there. He's still hanging on. The son is
Being
facing
nurtured.
corruption charges. Yet he's also,
But what is
But
important?
do you think they fear the same
They
fate?
fear the same fate. That's part of the reason why they are not, liberalizing and, opening the space for democracy to really come on. What they are doing is, I would say, protectionism of self and their families.
Which could be why they're not condemning what's going on in Zimbabwe.
That is part of the reason why most of them are keeping quiet. We must tell African leaders that democracy is on the rise, dictatorship is on the decline, and they should please do not destroy their countries because they want to remain in power. It is better to concede to what people want, and that is democracy.
I'll take that as your last word.
Well, there are lessons to learn. I mean, it is tragic that Mugabe has ended like this. When you read the issue of, Rhodesia and then Zimbabwe from the 70s and then to 1980,
You had a very
you
promising
will be very
future.
sad that, Mugabe has ended like this. So African leaders need to reflect and see all those who attempted to stay beyond their welcome. How did they end? That should be food for thought. That should, galvanize them to follow the right track, embrace democratic culture, know when to leave, govern well, have your, let legacy leave behind be what propels you to do what you do, and then hand over to, let there be a succession, and then let others carry on, so that ultimately is how a country develops. That is what, everything about leadership, politics, administration revolves around that. That is my message for African leaders.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Dr. Ologbena for joining us on Diplomatic Channel, as well as Dr. David Awarawo. Thank you for joining us on Diplomatic
Thank
Channel.
you very much.
That's the program this week. Glad you could join us. Go to channelstv.com to watch more episodes of Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.